Episode 388. Hey folks, Phil Zito here, and welcome to episode 388 of the Smart Buildings Academy podcast. And today is a special episode of the podcast because I will be interviewing Michael Conway, who is the founder and executive director of Stacks Joules. Now, Stacks Joules is a unique organization that holds a special place in my heart because of the mission-oriented focus that they have towards helping communities within the major cities and hopefully soon, across the United States and globally. They help these disenfranchised communities, folks who traditionally would not have an opportunity to step into the building automation space. And they help them both in the youth perspective, but also in the adult perspective, to gain the critical skills that they need to be able to step into the building automation space. They're doing a great mission. They are a nonprofit. And on this Giving Tuesday, I want to highlight them with this podcast interview. And my hope is that at the end of this podcast, you will go to podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/388, where there will be a link to Stacks Joules, and you can either make a donation to them or even more importantly, you can reach out to them to see how you can engage and assist their mission. We don't have a lot of organizations doing training in the building automation space. And, the inner cities and those communities are really underserved when it comes to building automation. It's something that is pretty important to myself. And it's something that Mike and his team are doing a great job of. So with that being said, let's do the interview. All righty, Mike. So I already introduced you to the audience, and I'm super stoked because, like I told you when we talked, I got a little emotional with your story and the mission you serve. And I really want to bring awareness of your organization to our audience. And my hope is that at the end of this, our audience is going to want to know more about your organization, how they can support you, how they can engage with you, and just the great work that you are accomplishing at Stacks Joules. So first off, who is Stacks Joules? It's an interesting name. It's really cool how you have it laid out on your website. Take me through that.
Yeah, sure. So actually, when you say who is Stacks Joules, the people or like what's the organization?
That is a good clarifying question. The organization, because we'll get to the who in just a second.
Yeah, cool. And it's a little wrapped together, but starting to establish the brand outside of Mike and John. So that's really good. So Stacks Joules is a nonprofit workforce training organization with the mission to bridge the technology opportunity gap for undervalued communities through a program in computer programming, wireless networking, towards jobs in the building automation system industry. We've been around for since 2017. We started in Boston, where we beta tested the curriculum and developed it, and then in 2019 we got a grant from NYSERDA.
Yeah, I saw that.
Shifted our focus to New York, and we doubled down on New York, and that's where we are currently.
So you say bridge the technology gap. What does that mean, and what does that look like?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's definitely a technology gap, and it's a technology opportunity gap, which I suppose there's a little difference there. But there are communities that don't have access to education, to quality, technology education, or just the hardware of technology, or the connection. So that's the mission part of our approach, and really why we decided to go the route of a nonprofit organization rather than for-profit. We really looked at both models as well as others, and decided it's the mission of who we serve and who we want to serve that led us to the nonprofit, right?
Mm-hmm. So,
It's go ahead.
no, please.
I was just going to say, yeah. So that opportunity gap is to to both bring real advanced technology training into
Mhm.
communities that haven't had that access, and I guess I want to say like at the core of that is this principle that um, it's really not right now it's not an issue of a lack of talent. The talent is there. Talent is this sort of innate ability or drive. And these communities are filled with talent,
Mhm.
huge, huge, huge amounts of talent. And it's that they haven't had the opportunity to flex it. And when you do open that opportunity, and it takes a whole system of support um, to get them up to speed. But when you do, the talent really starts to show itself, and that's how that's what we mean by getting them across that bridging the gap.
So there's a lot I want to unpack there. When you and I first talked several weeks back, a couple things you said stuck with me. One thing you said was that a lot of students enter your program not believing that they can do this. What does that look like, and how do you shape that belief?
Um, yeah, and this comes, directly from who is now one of our lead facilitators, one of our lead trainers, Francisca Peral, who was a student in our all girls high school program. Um, and so, yeah, just using that her as the example, and now she's teaching people that are getting jobs. So that's an
Mhm.
example of the talent that really was there. But when she joined us, she wouldn't even fully join. So she had a great teacher and is from a great school where they give a lot of support. And so she sort of negotiated, well, I'll be in there as almost like a classroom assistant. And she came in and she's sort of like hiding under bangs and very quiet and off to the side and real skeptical. And often that skepticism is actually a sign of intelligence for a lot of these communities, because they've been through being let down many
Mhm.
times, being let down by adults in their lives, by the education system, multiple ways. So they're very skeptical, and so that's what it looks like initially. Now, how we address that is, the very first day. Uh, and this also goes to like the trust and the respect, this principle that the talent is there, that they have innate talent, and it's a matter of giving opportunity. Is we bake that into our methodology. So it's always a do first and then formalize.
Mm.
So we have the lights. We start off with our lighting curriculum, and they've got a computer. They open up, they start typing in code that's going to eventually get a light to flash two colors. That's what we start with. Really, we don't grind them on Python essentials. What's a variable? This is like before they get to start, they just start typing, and from
Mm.
that, they screw up. They screw up spacing and capitalization and all of that, and so that starts the learning. Is you give them the inputs about why the light isn't flashing. And then once you get one light flashing, it just starts to like, the flash goes off literally. And then you put it in their hands. You say, oh, great, you got one light, two colors. How do you think you could get other colors? Or how do you
Mm.
think you could get other lights? And you put it on them to go in and experiment. And again, that awakens their confidence.
Mhm.
It also gets them to start working together. Like when they see one person figures it out, now it starts to spread. It's about communication, right? When they're having difficulty, you start walking them through. Oh, use a line number so I know where you're talking about. So all of this is really baked in, and it seems like it's informal, but it's very, very purposeful. It's designed that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to establish, the trust, that they're figuring it out, gives them the confidence to push on to even more complex topics, and it sets a relationship to where I or whoever the instructor is has a lot to offer and to guide, but it's more about the learner and the learner taking initiative, and that if they take initiative, the support is going to be there for them
Mm-hmm.
to thrive.
That's
That's a lot,
interesting.
but it's a lot to pack in.
I would add one word you missed. One word.
Yeah.
Fun. Because
Oh,
they're all smiling in every picture on your website.
totally. Yeah. That's I'd say the smile is, yeah, it's fun because we when you get those lights, we just had one where we set, like, I don't know, 15 or 20 of the individual bulbs in one area of the class and just said,
Mm-hmm.
like, all right, see if you can get it. And everyone's like getting those things going crazy. So there is fun involved. I think the smile is also pride.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a real, and that comes from my background. I taught high school math for over 20 years. And I really saw that, um, in the second half, I worked in schools that where students hadn't met success. So they were either transition schools or a school actually in a youth prison.
Mm.
And what I found, like, you give that kid a fraction worksheet, and all of that fraction worksheet says to them is failure. They've had it since they were in, you know, third or fourth grade, and it's
Mm-hmm.
always been a marker of failure for them. And so again, this goes to, like, that intelligence, like,
Mm.
who would step into that situation? And so when you're getting pushback, it's a mark of intelligence. They're like,
Yeah.
I've seen this before, and that makes me feel like, terrible. So why would I do it? And why, if you're trying to make me do this, then you're not, you're terrible too. So I would come in with kids who were scoring at, fifth, sixth grade math on the intake, and I would start off with trigonometry and, a sine b x plus, that full sine equation,
Mm-hmm.
and we start tricking it out and relate it to music and waves. And you know what that requires? Eventually doing some fraction
Yeah,
worksheets. But you grab them
exactly.
first, and then uh, you start with something complex, because that introduces pride. You don't have to
Mm-hmm.
tell them that this is something difficult. And as they start to understand it and anticipate the shape of the wave, just looking at numbers, they know that they've done something significant. And then the smiles come and it's pride. And now they're ready to, like, charge on to the next thing. So we
Mm-hmm.
use similar approaches with the learning and the progression of learning. We start off with lighting, which is very approachable. It is, Python programming, so it's got some technicality to it. We infuse the common, lighting control strategies and concepts, which
Mm-hmm.
then carry over so well. So that's all in there. And then that sets us up to go into HVAC fundamentals, which is far more theoretical.
Oh yeah.
And is more like lecture and videos and activities. But you've established the rapport, you've established the climate, you've got them on board, they're having fun. That allows you
Hmm.
to raise the bar, and so now you go for higher, and then that ends up leading into the system integration training, which is, like, very complex, and they, eat it up along the way.
So I don't know if this was intentional, but I just had a thought pop into my head, which is you start off with something that's very quantitative. The Python is quantitative because while you're not throwing it in their face that there's a right and wrong way, you're giving them the freedom to explore, which is a really cool paradigm shift. But you're starting off with a quantitative that, in a way, exactly what's going to deliver success to that, because it's
Yeah.
binary. It's, you either code it that way or not. And then you move to the theoretical. That is very I don't want to say against, but that is not the normal style of teaching.
Yep.
Normally it's theory and then moving to the quantitative. That's interesting. Was that by design or did you just kind of fall into that?
No, it's totally by design and by training over 20 years of teaching math. This is
Hmm.
like project-based learning. You could call it constructivist learning, um, and there's this idea that it's like loose and not technical, but what it actually does is allow you to get to more complex learning
Mhm.
um, more quickly, and then you're backfilling the basics.
Hmm.
Whereas the traditional approach is like, oh, well, you couldn't do that until you've learned and mastered all of these, prerequisites. And that's what's turning so many in our nation, and why we have like the difficulty, the skills, the lack of skills and certification attainment.
Mhm.
It is really because of that approach. You're turning them off. It's almost a system of like, put them through this grinder so that we can filter out. And we've done such an effective job of filtering that we don't have the workers and the skills and
Yeah.
the talent on board that we need. So you just
Yeah.
switch it around, because what doesn't change are the technical requirements of the job.
Mhm.
Right? We're not saying like, oh, take these and they're all fluffy and nice, but they can't do it. No, because then your building doesn't work, or the bridge falls down, or the plane crashes. So
Yep.
it's a different in methodology, not an outcome. I guess some outcomes are different because we're getting more and really undervalued and unexpected talent that come through by this change in methodology.
Yeah. I found it pretty interesting. So it's Francisca, right?
Yep.
Yeah, she's teaching Niagara now.
Oh, she's teaching the
It's
whole
crazy.
program.
And it's like, what was it? A year and a half, 2 years? It's wild.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's just a um, testament to like honoring the talent, honoring like it's amazing. Our programs right now are really focused on the Lower East Side
Mhm.
and Lower Manhattan. Although this high school programs draw from across the city, but our adult programs are mainly centered there. And so I'm just starting to have this awesome experience of like walking the streets of Alphabet City, if you know New York and the Lower East Side, and I'm starting to like see people, like meet people on the street who I think often were conditioned to like uh, be afraid of in
Mhm.
that urban setting, on a dark urban street.
Mhm.
You get that caution and those nerves. And here are people from the class or people that I've worked with. And it starts to just shift the perspective so that now I can walk down that street and be like,
Yeah,
man, let's get the rest of these into classes, because this is just, a strength of our nation is
absolutely.
everywhere you go, you seeing like just incredible people that with the right, support and opportunity can rise up and do great things for all of us.
Yeah, it's one of the things I tell my team when we look at hiring. I don't want people who look and think exactly like me because I'm just going to get the same of what I'm getting.
Yeah.
If I don't have different experiences and perspectives, then I mean, it's almost an unfair advantage if you get multiple different perspectives and experience sets to draw from because your competitors are not doing that.
Yeah, yeah, I fully agree with that. And it's a driver for some of like the companies that are hiring our graduates. They speak to that directly, right? They're
Absolutely.
looking. These are innovation companies. The smart buildings industry is about innovation. I think it doesn't get sold that way, or it's not perceived as that way, but it really is. I mean, look at all the new companies, the new devices. Go into any building and see the variety of of what's in there. It's highly innovative. So adding these, you know, different lived experience to your innovation team is gonna lead to to different outcomes. And then there's the aspect of like who's working in those buildings. So our
Hmm.
focus is on that, building automation system technician, and so typically a contractor going into buildings that have facilities managers, and so they're often they are more like our students, and are coming from the communities from which our students
Yeah.
come, than the typical college educated engineer track person.
Mm.
So there's an instant rapport between those teams, and we all know there can be some friction
Just a
between those
little.
teams, uh, and so that's another thing that the companies that we're working with who are hiring are really saying that they notice it as a strength.
Well, I think one of the things you told me when we were talking a little bit ago was how a lot of organizations, due to the cost of these metropolitan areas, can't draw talent into them. So, sourcing and developing talent from within the metropolitan area, I mean, that is something a lot of people they're considering it, but they're looking at a very finite talent pool, and then they're saying we can't find people.
Yeah, yeah, they're looking at these very traditional sources,
Hmm.
and those, you know, someone coming out I mean, an engineering program. Actually, I'm seeing more considering the smart building space, which is really encouraging. Um, but a computer science program, no,
Yeah.
they don't. They've never heard of it. The professors have never thought of it. There's just no no awareness. So, and yet that's where I think a lot of times either the posting is trying to speak to those people,
Hmm.
and we know it's ineffective because those postings sit on the sites forever and are never filled. So yeah, I mean, it's these people have families in New York. They're not going anywhere. They have children um, in the schools, so they're embedded in these communities, and they're and the streets of New York. There is a premium on loyalty,
Mm.
and that's another thing. Is like we have, I think the first hire that we got was 3 years ago. Yeah, Alberio Energy hired one of the first technicians, and just been moving up through that organization. We haven't had a single placement into a building automation technician role that has switched companies.
Yeah.
Um,
And you know what's
that'll
funny to
happen
me?
eventually, but it's
No,
loyalty
no.
is at a
So
premium.
so
Yeah,
let's highlight on that. That gets me excited because one of the things we run a training organization, you know that.
yeah,
Audience obviously knows that. One of the questions we get about people is, well, what if we invest in them and they just leave? And I'm telling you, I'm like, well, if you invest in them in the right way with a plan and a structure
yeah,
and a pathway, they are going to progress. And a
yeah,
lot of these people are just looking for someone to take a chance on them. And that's across, the diverse community, that's across the veteran community, the underemployed community. A lot of, I
yeah,
mean, I'll take just a second to talk about something that is I'm passionate about, which is veteran mental health.
yeah,
And one of the issues is that you exit the military and you don't have a path, or you feel like you don't have a path. And that leads to naturally bad outcomes. So, yeah, it's great to see you're doing that. Speaking of that, let's talk about Tyler and Gail. Let's, whichever
yeah.
one you want to talk about.
Yeah,
So,
sure thing. Yeah, I'll start with Gail, because he's a standout in that he was in our high school program. He went to UA Maker Academy. It's public high school in Lower Manhattan. did, engaged in our program. There, it was actually taught. It's taught during the school day as part of their career and technical education program. It was in the computer science pathway. So we work with a Python teacher. Teacher has a Python coding class, and we're bringing in. It's really the work-based learning component.
Hmm.
And so we're starting off with that Python and the lighting, and then we go through the whole thing. And so here's a guy. He just was not on a post-secondary college track. He had to work. He was already working, helping to support a large family, like not his own, but his brothers and sisters and parents. His father, his only work was collecting scrap metal, and so he had to be out there helping him. And that is, like, you can imagine what that does to the body and the mind and health wise. And it's not lucrative, but that's what he thought was going to be his life. And so when he got this opportunity, you don't have to tell a young person that if you learn to even just use a computer, that your prospects are going to be better. They know it. They just know it. So when you present that as an opportunity, he just dug right in and excelled throughout. We gave him mentors. And then, so he was hired, like, right off the bat, out of high school, by Dual Fuel, a company based in at that time in the Bronx, and he's been with them for over a year now, going on 2 years.
Yeah, I saw that. It's pretty cool.
Moving up the ranks. So that's just like, that's the kind of life changing, trajectory that that can happen through this work. And I know from your podcasts and listening to your stories that you've got some great ones there too. And I think we connect across those kinds of transformations of really life trajectories.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you said, because that is truly a life trajectory shift. I mean, you give someone the pathway where they can see a 6-figure career within, a couple of years. I mean, that is literally life-changing.
Yeah. And it's that mentality. And this is another thing that's like, we strategically work in throughout our courses, like this mentality of, like, add skills. When you add skill, you add value. And you can't ever let that stop. If you ever find that you're not adding a skill or a knowledge, your value isn't going to just flat. It's going to start to diminish, because technology changes, or someone's going to come up and be less expensive than you doing the same things. So that's like the negative side of it. The positive side is, your value just keeps growing. So you got to be in that mindset of, what's the next thing? And it also is, like, interesting and keeps you invigorated and makes for a far more enjoyable and interesting life.
Yes.
And that translates over to those that we're working with too. They're not looking to sit around, and they're often coming from a security job or a cashier's job, and they, in our adult programs. So Tyler, the other one, was in adult program, and in our partnership with Henry Street Settlement, amazing organization, and is really an important part of the story, because Tyler lived with his grandmother in public housing, was brought up by his grandmother, had started college, an architecture degree, and then ran out of money and had already taken on debt, but just could not, had to, like, take care of a grandmother and get on with life. He couldn't continue with that. Really smart guy, and personable. Oh my God, just like helping everyone in class, super advanced skills, charged through. But here's a case where he was young, because he had not, even if he'd stayed with it, he wouldn't have graduated from college yet. So I think it was 19. And he also had on his resume that he hadn't finished college. I'm just trying to, because we got him into interviews, and based on what we saw in class, we were like, man, this guy is like, he's going to nail it. He's just going to get the job. And he didn't. Something was holding him back. His youth, his experience, whatever it was. But we don't just put them out there. We work to get them into the job. So seeing that, what we were able to do through our partnership with Henry Street Settlement is they were actually able to hire him on as an intern. So he was an intern in our next adult cohort, helping us out in class. And because of that presence, a big part of our approach is having industry partners come in to talk about their work. They do specialized workshops, specialized training, and that's a purposeful in that it gives very advanced and current training to our trainees from industry professionals, but it's also introduces our talent to the industry very early on. And what we want them to see, what we want the industry partners to see, is the ability to learn something technical. So that's why we want them in there. We don't want them to come in at the finished project. We want to see them, progressing. That's what you want as an employer. So through this partnership, I'm able to, when we had a tech from Tech Systems integrator company in New
I know
York
them
City.
quite well.
Yeah, they're amazing and have been great supporters of ours. Diego Rodriguez was coming in, incredibly talented technician to do a lesson. And as he's prepping, I put Tyler with him to help him, right? Purposefully. I'm like, I want this guy to see what an amazing, just like jewel Tyler is. And it worked. He was hired up like even before the course was ended. And Tech Systems was like, well, we don't want to pull him away from your help. I'm like, are you kidding me? He's going from whatever the internship wage was to, over $60,000 with an education benefit, with a car stipend, with healthcare. All of that. And his comment after all this and following up with him, the thing that he's most happy about is that he's able to take care of his grandmother.
That's really cool.
That's the character that's out there. It's, they're family people. They're just like us. They're family people. They want to make their lives better. They're typically been struggling in low wage positions, so they've had that grind. They're looking for a leg up. They work hard. They're loyal. It's like that's where our success comes from. Is getting them the right set of competencies, very focused, high value competencies, and really what we're doing is verifying that they can learn something complex and that they're going to continue to learn and add value to themselves and the companies that are lucky enough to hire them.
Well, I think you're giving them the belief that they can learn something complex. The capability's there. Yeah, it's limited by the belief.
Yeah, and the opportunity. They haven't had the opportunity to flex it, right?
Because you and I were talking about traditional apprenticeship models and traditional employment models and how a lot of these folks would have been left behind with how these traditional models are structured. So it's nice. Let's you've talked about people getting involved with you. You've talked about how people partner alongside you. How do they get involved with you? How do they support you? What does that look like? Yeah.
So it's we call it it's along a work-based learning continuum, and so that can start off very lightly as 20 minutes, visit a class in person or virtually, and share about your career path, how you got there, and then something about your company and what your company does. Just about exposure, right? And then that steps up to like, well, come on in and do a lesson. Like teach something relevant to where we are in a curriculum and make it specialized and very, very new. That can then progress to a job shadow, a site visit, an internship, a job. And our most successful partnerships have actually followed that continuum.
Yeah.
And we're starting to get to where we have now that we have some established. Oh shoot! I gotta plug my computer in just a second.
No worries.
Okay. All right. Sorry
It's
about
all
that.
good.
Okay, got it. Finally.
I'll add that to my guest checklist.
Yeah. Shoot.
Is your computer plugged in?
About that.
All right. So you were saying it naturally progresses as your partners go and they do the
right.
initial 20-minute introduction.
Yep. It typically goes there. I guess what I was about to say is now that we have a growing group of those who have been hired, we're starting to get companies come directly to us looking for talent.
That's pretty cool.
And that's a great step. It's something that we're grappling with to figure out because we want to honor the commitment of the companies that really participate.
Yeah.
At the same time, we're not about to tell. We can't tell a student, "Oh, take that job, don't take this one."
Yeah.
But we do. We tell them like, "Hey, when you're having the choice of which job to go in, consider that how they treat you. Like you need to have some information about how you will be treated and what opportunities. And if someone's coming in and working with you right off the bat, that's a really strong message of their commitment to talent development.
Yeah.
And so, look at your options and weigh them, and then make your best decision.
Yeah, absolutely. It's often what I tell folks is, yes, salary is important, but you also have to look at what does your life cycle look like at this business? Is this one where it's a collaborative business relationship where they are getting to know you, they're getting to actually understand where you want to go and helping you reach that path? Or is this a very transactional relationship?
Yeah.
And the market's shifting to more collaborative, but there still are transactional organizations out there.
And you know what? We occasionally have some students that are transactional.
Yep.
They're like, nope, I want to find this. My goal is to like start something on my own someday. So I'm looking for a company that I can get in there and get some experience and then start looking for the next move. And that's going to be more of a transactional approach. It's not common. The most common is that they're looking for stability
Mm.
and confidence that they're going to progress. That's what the by and large our graduates are looking for.
So speaking of graduates and speaking of collaboration, let's visualize that real quick with your partnership with Henry Street Settlement, correct?
Yep.
Right? I got it right. Woohoo. All right.
So this is comes back to that mission, right? And so we're very focused on communities that are undervalued, that haven't had access, and then that comes along with a lot of other things. So we need to make sure that to be successful, we've got to be ready to support a whole range of needs that often serve as barriers for for people that are either in poverty or haven't had these opportunities, right? So we partner with community organizations, and Henry Street Settlement, they've been around for 125 years. They have, I think they serve over 60,000 people every year across a range of housing, health and nutrition, healthcare, mental health, childcare, after school educational programming, and job readiness and placement. They'd
Hmm.
never done a technical training. They had done, like resume workshops and ESL programs for English language. So more like general, and then placing them into like city jobs
Hmm.
and that. So um, we come in with our technical training, but really aligned in having a methodology to serve their communities, and they have these structures of support that um, allow. We have a very high retention rate
Hmm.
through our courses, and it's really about this. I mean, it's things like eyeglasses. See them squinting from the back. It happens every single time. Now we know to look for it, and we catch it in like the first classes. We can tell who needs a set of eyeglasses, and you know
That's
what? Henry
interesting.
sets up, gets them into a program, and they get eyeglasses pretty quick. Nothing like there's.
Huh.
We just look at like, no, we don't want any barrier. Bring yourself, and bring your, your strong work ethic and attitude, and we're going to do everything we can to clear everything out so that your talent
Hmm.
isn't obscured.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Speaking of talent, so what are you most excited about in the talent development space? Like what's top of mind?
Yeah, I think uh, for us, so it's going to come from my work because that's where I'm embedded, right? Is So we have an initiative right now. Actually, has received some funding from Google, and it is and we're working with our partner Tech Systems, who has hired the most of our highest number of our graduates. And this project is to take the another one of our community partners is the Lower East Side Girls Club. We have
Yeah,
hosted an all girls high school cohort there for 3 years now, and this funding will launch an all women's cohort. So that's pretty exciting.
that is pretty cool.
It's going to do it by implementing a building automation system for their 35,000 square foot building.
Hmm.
So we're turning the very building into a living, BAS learning lab.
That is pretty cool.
And yeah, so that's it, it's this combination. So it's not just workforce in general, but it's in this industry. What it makes it for me really interesting and exciting is it's this combination of it is still grounded in a place
Hmm.
to some extent. The buildings, it's optimizing for comfort and efficiency in these places, um, and so that we have this ability now to actualize that in a very real way for our training, get
Hmm.
that data to start to flow. You know, right now when we're doing our like Niagara activities and things, they're just simulations of pump systems or other systems. Um, and in this case, we're going to be able to shift those activities to the actual systems in the girls club. So then
Hmm.
we're building them digitally, and then we get the actual data coming off the system to be able to verify it and link it together. Really, really excited about that initiative in every sense. To have an all women's cohort, to have this building to play with, and really start to have that work-based learning. All of it's just really, really exciting.
Yeah, and also you all are on the front lines of energy efficiency being in New York City.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you've got the state law coming, and it's really fascinating to me that these folks are going to be able to experience literally this all happens what 2024 it takes effect if I remember correctly, the new
yeah,
state
yeah,
law on
yeah.
energy
I
efficiency.
think the penalties. It's already
Yeah.
like they already have to
Yeah.
benchmark and they have to post it. the penalties are slated to begin to be sort of meted out in 2024.
So they're coming in right when all the stuff we've talked about for years is actually going to start to be implemented.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
fascinating.
and that's a real yeah, it's a driver of opportunity and employment. And it's also exciting about choosing this venue. So I mean, the system we're going to put in there isn't really appropriate to a 35,000 square foot because most of the work is still in larger buildings.
Hmm.
But eventually, the largest building stock nationally is that 25 to 75,000 square foot building.
Absolutely.
We've got to have solutions for that. And so this is gonna we've got some other partners who are looking at this as an opportunity to like create playbook for working in this size building. And
Hmm.
then we'll be directly creating the workforce to implement that playbook across that huge stock of buildings across the nation.
And that should energize and scare the audience at the same time. And I'll tell you why I use both those words. It should energize them because anything you read, it could be 60 to 80% of building stock is less than 50,000 square feet. And it doesn't have a building automation system. So if you're an optimist, you're looking at huge market opportunity, very blue ocean, a lot of revenue to potentially be made. If you're a pessimist, you could go, a lot of opportunity. If we actually win this opportunity, we have no way to execute it because we're barely executing the large builds.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's I think it's a driver of innovation. Because yeah, it can't it's not happening now because of it's too expensive. They don't have the solutions, and I don't know
Mm.
that it's going to be implementing building automation systems. But it's going to be getting data to the cloud and operationalizing using fault detection and diagnostics. I see that that's going to be a component.
Mm.
Um, and that's what will get the opportunity as we get the data to flow in this building. It's going to allow us to start developing training programs towards those applications.
I think it'll be building automation.
Hey,
I think it'll be like like Raspberry Pi level automation.
right.
I don't think it'll be, commercial grade DDC, but I don't think it'll be residential, systems. I think it'll be this kind of hybrid. And man, that is a lot of potential revenue. Holy moly. And the service side of it, because service is usually 4x of your construction. So, ooh,
Yeah,
man, that's wild.
yeah. It's just a huge amount, and we need it. We need the talent in the industry as it is. So uh, we're going for it, and it's
Let me
fun, man. Oh my god, it is. It's stressful. It's really stressful raising money because we're doing all this without charging. We don't charge
Yeah,
any
I
of
know
our.
that's impressive,
We
and
got to
it's one of the
raise
things.
all that money, make it happen, and we're giving them like our commitment is to give the absolute best programming. The programming I got coming up. My parents spared nothing, and I have 7 brothers and sisters, so there's a lot of
Hmm.
us. But we got lived in a town with great, fantastic public schools. We're in after school programs. So I really measure it off of how was I treated,
Hmm.
and I'm really committed to turning it around and treating those we serve with the same level of commitment and care.
Hmm. Let me ask you. I got two more questions for
Yeah.
you because I want to be respectful of time. But first off, the multi-billion-dollar question in the talent space: how do you engage youth? How do you draw youth into a program like this?
Really, really great question. I mean, I think I've talked about the lights and getting into the classroom with the lights flashing, and so you have to have this, like, when you're
Hmm.
designing the training and the experiences. It's got to have an engagement factor. It can't only have it. It it's incredibly engaging. It comes back to that conversation about pride that I was talking about before. You, if you get them to associate the industry, the work, the experience with pride of self, you
Mm.
got it. And so that means, like, yes, having it engaging and flashing lights and everything, but also having it be highly technical, something that they are can be proud that they learned,
Mm.
that they didn't expect to learn. So so that's one. I'll say this: our high school programs, even though we identify and work with schools to identify students like Gail, who are not on, like, a college track, the result of our program has been the vast, vast majority decide to go on to post-secondary training,
Mm.
2 or 4 year colleges. So we're having that effect of awakening that confidence. Um, and we saw that originally, like, because we're talking with our industry partners, like, hey, we got talent coming, and then, oops, they're going to college, so we
Hmm.
got to wait 4 years. So that's why we had in our plans, but we very quickly jumped ahead on the adult cohorts because they are
Mm.
ready. They go right in. Well, I'm just realizing this now because we have some of our graduates from high school programs contacting us as juniors in computer science, in engineering, and a
Mm.
variety of areas. So we're starting to have this group of college graduates who did our program in high school, and our like question and I, you know, request or challenge to the industry is, like, we got to keep them involved. We got to
Mm.
keep them engaged. And how you do that when they're a junior in college, especially if they're in a computer science program, is you got to get them internships. You know, you
Yep.
have to have an intern. You got to, like, engage them in work, because where they're going to work now, they already are racking up internships at Uber, and used to be Meta and Twitter, but not anymore. But they're still
We
getting
shall
them
not talk about that.
at Lyft and Uber and all sorts of apps
Mm.
and other technology, the more traditional, like what you'd think of. And
Mm.
if we're going to keep them and get them into this industry, which I think there's a huge opportunity, because they
Yeah.
want to contribute to society, and they're not seeing that in these apps and things.
Hmm.
But we got to, like, step up and have an opportunity to keep them engaged, and that's going to be, through paid internships.
Interesting. So I got one more question for you. What is one thing you want the audience to know? Could be anything. It's very open ended for a reason.
Yeah. What do I want the audience to know? I come right back to our first principles and mission. It's our program is really, on a very high level. I realize this about my career as an educator, and now here is, it's really been examining, we're all created equal.
Hmm.
And what does that mean? Because it's not a straightforward question, right? There are differences, and so what does it mean to us, and what does it mean as a nation to have that as a founding principle, and how do we move that forward? And so this idea that there is talent on every block and in every
Hmm.
lane of our country, um, is coming back to that principle.
Hmm.
And we have so much to gain, and really such a bright future, which is sometimes hard to find these days, but it's
Hmm.
there. It's there in these communities and in this talent. So that's what I want to, sort of remind people, is that this great future is there, and to me, it comes from this principle um, uh, of just boundless talent in our
Hmm.
great nation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Mike, for being on the podcast. I appreciate it. It was super enjoyable. I'm really bought into your mission, and I hope the audience is as well.
Phil,
So
thank
thank you
you
for
so
being here.
much. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for the work that you're doing. I know it was all about Stacks and Jewels, but again, I come back to the stories you've told about some of the individuals that you've helped. We're doing it together, and there's a lot of room for us to play together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thanks.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed this interview with Mike Conway. You can hear the passion in his voice. You can hear the stories of success they've had. And I want to point out that, Stacks and Joules is a nonprofit. And so they rely on folks like yourself through donations or through donating service, or organizations like Smart Buildings Academy who are promoting them to our large audience, bringing awareness of their mission and what they're doing. So I really encourage you, if Mike's message struck a chord, to go to podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/388. And you will see a link to go and learn more about Stacks and Joules. And I really want you to click on that link, do some good on this Giving Tuesday, and help us to continue to grow the building automation community. Thanks so much, folks. And I look forward to talking to you on the next podcast. Take care.